Hey everyone, welcome back to FSi DFS. Looking at the Friday night main slate, 12 games. Two games I think are going to be a little impacted by the weather. It's going to be the Yankees at Baltimore game, along with the Rockies at the Mets. Cincinnati, it's got the rain icon, but looking at whatever, I think it should be fine. Should be fine. Everything else looks pretty good. Winds are going to be out in Boston, so maybe a little bit of a boost towards the bats there. And then in terms of pitching, I just want to note real quick, there's no determination on who the Boston pitcher is yet, or the Pittsburgh pitcher. So DK has Gonzalez. I've seen Gonzalez some other places, but on MLB.com, he's not listed as a starter. And I always go with MLB.com as they have been, over the years I've been doing this, the most trustworthy ones. So he's still kind of to be determined. And then also Criswell, the Boston starter, is going to be to be determined as well. So just pay attention to that as the day goes on. I didn't really include them too much into my rankings and the sheet and everything, but we'll still talk about them as we go. So we do have the sheet, we'll pull that up in a little bit here, but let's just kind of focus on the top pitchers, the five guys above 9K. And honestly, I kind of have them ranked exactly in the order that they are priced. So Garrett Cole, I have the least amount of interest in. Tough matchup against Baltimore, but I will admittedly say Baltimore, their bats are ice cold right now. You also have the rain factor and the potential of a delay to come back into it as well. And, putting those two things with, the matchup against Baltimore, the possibility of rain, Cole still not seeming to look like himself yet in his return from injury. And I just don't really have much interest in him at 9.2K when there's so many other options on a 12-game slate. Crochet is going to be number one up at the top, though, facing off against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a top 5 team in terms of strikeouts, the most strikeouts. They strike out the most, the 5th most time against left-handed pitching. And Crochet, while he had his struggles in his last start, he has been dominant pretty much all season long, albeit a couple of starts. But, we're in the middle of July at this point in time. So 10.3, a very justifiable salary. I just wish he was playing on a better team where you could, maybe trust for him to get a win more often. With the talent that he has, the strikeout rate that he has, to only be 6-6, that's just absolutely ridiculous. But Crochet, by far, he's my favorite pitcher on the board. Sonny Gray facing off against Chicago. Chicago is another team that does strike out quite a bit. I think they're a top 8 team in terms of strikeout rate against right-handed pitchers. And Gray, he's another guy just like Crochet who has that strikeout upside that we can trust and that strikeout floor that we can trust as well. So while they are the two most expensive guys, I think it's entirely justifiable to be plugging each of those guys into your lineup. Ryan and Peralta, they're kind of there. They're not fades by any means at all. It's just simply if I had $400 or $500 extra salary, I'm going to go up to Crochet. I'm going to go to Crochet and Gray. But in terms of GPP, I think they're fantastic GPP pivots. We both know what the strikeout and the ceiling games that can come from each of these guys. Ryan also playing in a nice pitcher's park in San Francisco. Peralta facing off against Washington. Washington doesn't strike out a whole lot as a team. But again, I think if you're looking towards cash games, I'm going to have a lot more interest in the Crochet and Gray. But if you're looking at GPP and some lower ownership and the upside, I'm going to go with Peralta and Ryan. So looking at the sheet, this is kind of where I ranked everything. Again, it just kind of follows the salaries in terms of this high tier. Again, pitchers for Boston and Pittsburgh are just still kind of a little up in the air. Going into the mid-tier, I really like this mid-tier. Reagan's, he's going to be my front runner, is my favorite, we'll say upside play. Boston, a 30% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching so far this season. So absolutely knock to them. And Reagan's, he is a pitcher that has that elite strikeout rate. You can see he's got 134 strikeouts in just 109 innings pitched. He's capable of getting you that 10, 12 strikeout game, and it's entirely possible that it can happen here against Boston with just how much they strike out. Salary, we're getting a huge discount off of him. Like they bumped him down from that mid 9K range to 10K range for when he entered into Coors, but they never priced him right back up. So facing off against Boston, the Winds, I mentioned it earlier, are blowing out, so pay a little bit of attention towards that. It is slightly concerning, but at the same time, wins don't really matter when your team's going to be striking out 12 times. So Reagans, I think he's going to be my favorite upside pitcher. Manaea, man, he keeps on proving himself, doing a little bit better as the season goes on here. He's been doing very well. But let's be wrong. Let's be honest. I mean, 4 of his past 5 starts, 1 or fewer earned runs. The walk rates are still concerning, but Colorado does not strike out much as a team. And we saw Colorado just in Cincinnati. These guys outside of Coors Field, it's an entirely different offense, and they're not even that great in Coors Field. So I'm going to have really interest in any pitcher against Colorado, but Manaea, with the consistent strikeout rate that he has been displaying as of late, he's going to be making the ranks up there a little bit. I could totally understand, though, if you want to put Brown above Manaea. Brown, he's been a workhorse all season long. He's going to give you 100 pitches, and it doesn't matter if he's doing well or if he's doing poorly. And he did very, very poorly in his last start against Minnesota. Still on 105 pitches. Pretty crazy. But aside from that Minnesota game, he's very steady, very solid. Facing off against Texas, the Texas bats have started to come alive quite a bit here. Guys like Seager and Lowe and Wyatt Langford, they're all smacking the cover off the ball. Even Jonah Heim's hitting over 300 over the past 2 weeks. While the offense has struggled for Texas, and we've kind of been picking on them, throughout the course of the season a little bit more than we should have, it seems like they might be finally coming back around. And Hunter Brown, I think he's a solid play. I think he can give you some floor, but at the same time, when things go bad, they go really, really bad for him. And that's kind of why I'm making Texas one of my favorite GPP stacks on the day. Anderson, speaking of guys who had just incredible starts last time out, Anderson was one of those. But I don't trust it. I just really don't have much interest in him. And then Wu, well, this guy is such a good pitcher. He's so good. But 1, he's coming off the IL. And 2, even when he's fully healthy, he's just not a pitcher who's going to be going super, super deep into the game. You can see his max limit is going to be 6 innings pitched. It doesn't matter how well he is pitching. I mean, no earned runs, 2 hits against, no walks, 6 Ks, and they're still yeah, you know what, 85 pitches, that's too many. We're going to be pulling you here. So I really like the matchup. You can see he faced off against the Angels, went 6 innings, no earned runs, 3 hits against, no walks, but at the same time, they pull him. So they really got this weird leash on Wu for whatever reason it is, and it makes his 8.7K salary a little bit tougher to justify. But if I could guarantee that he was going to be going out and had the chance of getting 7 innings pitched, 90 plus pitches, I'd have a whole lot more interest. But because of the limitations on him, I gotta kind of pull back a little bit. In terms of the cheap tier, I put Gonzalez, question mark. Pittsburgh, DK has Gonzalez. And I haven't seen any articles stating that it is going to be Gonzalez, but there was one that was hinting that it could be Gonzalez. If it is, he's going to be my favorite cheap option on the day facing off against the White Sox. If it is not Gonzalez, I'm going to go with Andrew Heaney. And man, I scratch my neck here because I don't know. This cheap tier, I fully admit, I was bouncing around between Heaney or Schwellenbach, Spears, Rodriguez, and then it was Schwellenbach up top, and then at one point I had Rodriguez up at the top. But I think it just kind of points out to don't get too caught up on one guy in this cheap tier. I think that Vasquez, I think you could put over more so into the fade category. He's viable. But I think, Rodriguez and above, you could really organize these guys in a lot of different ways. I'm going to go with Andrew Heaney facing off against Houston, just with the strikeouts that he is potentially able to get, and they have been a little bit more consistent as of late. Schwellenbach facing off against San Diego, While I do think that Schwalbenbach's a better pitcher, the San Diego bats scare me a little bit more so than the Houston bats do. But either way, both of these teams are bottom 3 teams in strikeout rate. So I'm not really expecting many strikeouts from Schwalbenbach, nor am I expecting many strikeouts from Heaney, which then leads us down to guys like Spears facing off against Miami, but playing in that small ballpark of Cincinnati is never reassuring at all. And Spears doesn't have the strikeout upside that the other guys can have, but it's kind of neutralized by facing off against Miami. And then you got Yariel Rodriguez facing off against Arizona. Arizona really struggles against right-handed pitching. Rodriguez, he's been looking a lot better in his past 2 starts here, so maybe he's finally figured something out after another little break following that Cleveland game, after he had the other injury that he was dealing with throughout the month of May and June. But my concern with him is the leash, and also he faced off against Seattle, who strikes out just an absolutely insane amount. So you can kind of see where all these guys are justifiably maybe the better pitcher in this cheap tier, but see, now even talking about it, not just thinking in my head and actually verbally saying it, I kind of almost want to put Rodriguez more towards the top here. And I'm sure I'm just going to debate and wrestle with this, throughout. So maybe I should kind of pay attention to where you expect ownership to lie, and getting thoughts from different sources and seeing, maybe there's a lot of chatter on Heaney, maybe get off of him and go with Rodriguez and whatnot. Everybody else, fade, no interest. So going into the bats, again, pay attention to the New York Mets game, the New York Yankees game, just because I do really like the bats of those teams, but at the same time, if the weather's looking really dicey, I'm going to reduce some interest in them there. But Cincinnati, they're going to be my favorite team on the board here, facing off against Trinos, and then Miami. Cincinnati, one of the hottest bats in the league right now. They just had a 4-game series against Colorado, and really anybody facing off against Colorado, their bats are going to be looking really well, which is another reason why I'm going to have quite a bit of interest in the Mets. LA De Cruz, he was out last game. He didn't play yesterday, but it was simply a rest day. I think he only had 1 rest day throughout the course of the season leading up to yesterday. And then it was a day game following a night game. So De La Cruz, they just kind of sat him just for some rest. And then he's going to have the All-Star break where he's going to be playing, and he really doesn't get any rest. So he should be well rested for this game. He would be my top option if you are going with the Cincinnati stack. Stevenson, he's got 3 home runs in his past 2 games. 4 home runs in his past 3 games. Yeah, he's been blowing the cover off the ball. We actually had him cored in our lineups, in our cash builds for these 2 34 and 19 games. So super thrilled about that. It really helped us out. But aside from that, can we just say how insane scores were yesterday for the early slate? There were guys who were hitting 170 and not even catching double ups. It was bananas. Absolute bananas. But Cincinnati, definitely a top stack, facing off against 1, Trinos, and then 2, once he's out early, you get to arguably the worst bullpen in baseball. In a small ballpark, all the interest in Cincinnati. In terms of GPP, kind of already hinted towards it. Texas going up against Hunter Brown. Brown, he's a solid pitcher, but man, when he's off, he is really off, and they don't seem to want to pull him at all. So pay attention. Nope. Don't pay attention to Alvarez. Seager, Lowe, Langford. These would probably be the first 3 guys that I would be putting into your lineup. All 3 of these guys have been doing absolutely fantastic at the plate as of late. Even Jonah Heim is hitting over 300 in his past 10 starts. So going to have interest in all of these guys. They're quite affordable as well. 2 of these guys are priced under 3.8. So you're going to be able to get a nice stack of them and still get some, pricey, expensive pitchers, which just happens if you do this. It's possible, but I would definitely more so go towards can you get the upside of Crochet or Gray and the upside of a ceiling game of Reagans as well. Stack them with Texas. I don't mind that in a GPP upside kind of build. But Texas is going to be number 1, Yankees number 2, and then Toronto. Man, Vegas really likes them in terms of like they have a very high implied run total here tonight, but it's still just like they've gone an entire season of just disappointing us. But we love to pick against Nelson because Nelson loves to give up a lot of extremely hard contact. So yeah, and Toronto, very affordable, very cheap. That half their lineup is under 4K, and nobody's priced above Vlad at 4.8. So you can, with this stack, you could possibly get the Ryan and Peralta combination, or a Crochet and Peralta combination, or a Crochet and Ryan combination. You can get those two, high salary pitchers with Toronto if you are going in that route. And then cheap tier, St. Louis, they're going to be my favorite stack on the board in terms of cheap. Burleson, he's going to be my number one. He would be the first guy to be putting in. I think he's 4.1K, but he's been smacking the cover off the ball. Love the matchup that they have against Hendricks. Hendricks just doesn't strike out anybody. Burleson, 4.1K. He might even be like a one-off guy that I would put into cash builds. Like, I have that much faith in him in doing well here. And yeah. So, that kind of covers where I kind of think the slate is going to be heading. And hopefully this was able to help you out in guiding you in the right direction. So thanks as always, for watching. Really do appreciate it. Good luck in all of your contests here tonight. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you in the next one.